There's one candidate that I do really have my eye on, and that is Robert Kennedy Jr. A little background about me. I do like politics. I'm a political person, but I haven't voted in the last two elections, the two elections being the ones that I was old enough to actually vote in. I didn't vote for Hillary or for Trump, and I didn't vote for Trump or for Biden, mainly because I wouldn't feel comfortable casting my ballot for either of those candidates at the time. But I think RFK Jr. is the best presidential candidate that we've had come by in several years, and definitely since I've been of age of voting. So I want to break down a few of the reasons why I like him. He's a centrist, a little bit left of center leaning, which I think would be good for America. And I'm going to just go through and break down a couple of his policies that I agree with and a few that I don't agree with. But just to get you guys caught up on why I think he is the candidate that America needs 2024 and why I'll probably be casting my vote for him in November. Here's a breakdown of some of his economic and employment policies. First and foremost, and this is something that I do care about, government paid college tuition. RFK has come out and said that he is for the government providing tuition for college. I think college should be free for everybody. I think the government should be able to pay for it. I think a more educated workforce would lead to increased GDP growth, and it would make America more competitive on a global scale, which is something that we're starting to lack at the moment. And I think we should definitely remove the financial barriers to higher education, and we should allow people from all financial backgrounds and all walks of life to have an equal opportunity at upward mobility through a college education. And not only that, but we need to alleviate the student loan crisis. People who are 18, 19, 20 years old are getting tens of thousands of dollars into debt for a degree that may or may not help them in this economic climate. So I think reducing that debt burden would be a really good thing for people upon graduation and would significantly improve the economy. Next up, RFK has stated that he supports tax breaks for domestic jobs, supports giving tax breaks to companies who incentivize their employees to stay within the United States, keeping these jobs here, local, domestic. I think this would encourage businesses to invest and expand within the U.S. This would stimulate our economy. And I think that would also lead to a lot more job opportunities, lower unemployment rates, and it would deter businesses from relocating jobs out of the country. And a lot of these countries do have lower production costs, so we're going to have to find a way to compete with that going forward over the next couple decades. I think that's one way that we could do it. 4-day work week, something that RFK has pushed for. There are a few studies out there that suggest that shorter work weeks can actually maintain or increase worker productivity levels. Not only that, but the obvious mental health and work-life balance that it would provide for employees. I think a lot of people would benefit from having a reduced burnout effect and improved work-life harmony within their family. Fewer commutes, obviously, would be important, and that even has an environmental factor that goes into it as well if we have fewer vehicles on the roads for 1 day a week. Another cool thing that RFK has come out in favor of is subsidizing local farmers, something I feel strongly about. I think this would be a direct boost to many local economies. And I think as Americans, we need to ensure the viability of small-scale farming. Most people that I know are against factory farming. I think they're heinous. And just the fact that you can't go into one of them with a camera through some of these protection laws should say enough. So I definitely think we should subsidize local farmers, strengthen our local food supplies, and that was something that was obvious during the COVID-19 pandemic, that our food chains and our food supplies can be disrupted. Need to keep the viability of small-scale farming, need to strengthen our local food systems. That would make our nation less vulnerable to these global supply chain disruptions, like the one that we saw with COVID. Next up, no increased tax on capital gains. I do think we should lower taxes on investment returns. I think this would encourage more investment in our economy and allow people to grow their wealth. This would potentially lead to a lot of different avenues, philanthropic efforts, reinvestments. I don't think we need to increase the tax rates for most things. So that's one policy that I do think RFK has hit right on the head. And I want to move on now to some of his justice and social reform policies that I agree with and that I think are important to touch on. First and foremost, at the top of that list, decriminalizing drug use and legalizing marijuana. This is something that Biden said that he would do, and we're now over halfway into his presidency, and it hasn't been done. So I think we treat drug use as a health issue rather than a criminal issue. That would be a better way to address addiction, and not to mention that the marijuana industry has massive economic upside. We could tax that. It provides job creations, provides tourism, which is something that Colorado really benefited from at the beginning of its legalization of marijuana. And I think that these courts and judicial systems should focus more on actual criminal cases, reducing those backlogs and the costs associated with them rather than pursuing drug use and marijuana crimes. So if RFK can decriminalize some of this drug use and legalize marijuana, I think that would be a great thing for America, and that's a great policy to run behind. No privately run prisons. This is another thing I feel really strongly about and something that RFK has came out against. There should not be a profit motive for incarceration. I think justice and rehabilitation should be the goal of the prison system, not revenue. It's disturbing to me that as humans, if we are the most intelligent creatures in the universe, which we don't know now, obviously, because of these UFO disclosures, but if we are the most intelligent, beautiful creatures in the universe, capable of reasoning and logic, to lock us up in a cage for any reason that is not absolutely necessary is disturbing, it's disgusting, and it's heinous, and it's taking away from our local communities. So I think not decriminalizing, but removing the profit motive from prisons would be a huge plus for America. And that's something that our society just needs, in my opinion. The demilitarization of police departments. This is something that I saw in the news earlier this week up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Right now, the police in some police departments who have the necessary funds can pull up to your house with a tank and assault rifles and grenades and smoke bombs to get you out of your house. Is that fair? Is that necessary? I'll leave that up to you to answer. I am pro-police. I don't think that we should defund them, but I definitely don't think that the police departments in this country need to have military-grade gear where they can pull up to your house in a military tank. I think this would establish a lot more trust between the police and the communities, and it would lead to better cooperation and safety if people felt more safe around the cops in their neighborhoods. And redirect those funds. Put them into community service, mental health resources, crime prevention initiatives. There's no reason that the police force down the street needs to have a tank and you don't get a tank. That's just silly in my opinion. Another policy that RFK has is no mandatory minimums for drug possession. I agree with this. I think we just need more systems for people who are struggling with addiction. Our prisons are already crowded enough. I think there does not need to be a mandatory minimum for drug possession. We can definitely focus more on violent crime, and we can use prison resources in a way more efficient way than putting people in jail mandatory minimums for drug possessions. For most substances, that should actually be legal as long as they're not harming and killing people in the first place. Moving on to the next topic, something that I also feel strongly about is assisted suicide. I think as humans, we should have autonomy over our own bodies, and we should be able to make the decision to either further or end our lives based on our own willpower. We should have those individual rights, and to live or to die is a profound personal decision that I think people should be free to make. Not only that, but terminally ill patients should have an exit to their life with dignity, and that can alleviate prolonged medical suffering and prolonged medical bills. So I think assisted suicide, physician-assisted suicide, is a constitutional right that people can and should have. So the fact that RFK is in favor of that speaks volumes to me. I think that's a good policy. Fewer welfare restrictions. I think there should be a safety net for people who are facing financial hardship, and vulnerable populations shouldn't have to jump through more hoops to get on welfare. I think this could act as an economic stimulus. Recipients can spend that money on goods and services and food that they need. So lowering that barrier for financial welfare is something that I'm in favor of, something that RFK has come out and stated that he is in favor of as well. I want to move on now to government transparency and anti-corruption. These are two things that I care about, and I think that a lot of Americans care about, and there are a lot of pressing issues here that we can focus on, so let's jump into those as well. First up, term limits for members of Congress and the Supreme Court. We need new ideas. We need fresh blood in those super high positions of power. I think we need to have diverse perspectives in those positions. I think those positions, especially in Congress and on the Supreme Court, are super entrenched in political ideology right now. And those positions need to be collaborative. So term limits for members of Congress and the Supreme Court, not only to further encourage cooperation, but to get rid of corruption. Those are things that I'm highly in favor for, and that RFK has also supported in the past. Donation limits for political candidates. Ultra-wealthy corporations and donations should not be able to influence our elections in the way that they do. Politicians shouldn't be able to be bought and sold by money. So I think our politicians should cater to their constituents, to their political base, not just donors that can buy and sell them, because that's how we got here in the first place with the pharmaceutical companies who have now essentially captured our Congress, our Senate, and our political system with money. And I think for the future of our democracy, we need to wipe that slate clean. There should definitely be donation limits for political candidates. On the back of that, I think there should be a ban on lobbyists becoming... Let me rephrase that. There should be a ban on these political officials becoming lobbyists and being able to trade their stocks. There should be regulations on both of those. I think politicians, especially right now, are taking advantage of their position for their own personal financial interests. I think legislative decisions should be made in the nation's best interest, not in the interest of the politicians whose pockets are getting lined up. So as of right now, if you are a White House official, you can leave office and immediately become a lobbyist for some of these corporations and companies that have a ton of influence, not only over America, but also over officials. So a 5-year ban on that would be good with me. I don't think you should be able to just get out of office and immediately start bribing other officials with money. Whistleblower laws, something that I'm also in favor of. And thanks to whistleblower laws, we now potentially know of the existence of UFOs and aliens. So I think there's a lot of wrongdoing within our institutions and within our government, and people should have an incentive and a safety net to be able to come out and disclose those without fear of retribution, without fear of incarceration. We just need transparency between the government and the public. And people have the right to know. People should be informed about these actions taken by the government. This would really increase trust between us and the government. And another thing that RFK has come out in favor of is granting immunity to Edward Snowden. I feel strongly that Snowden should be pardoned, that he should be allowed to come back to America. The fact that he made the disclosures that he did and has spent the last however long years in exile in Russia, a country that we're now essentially at war with, is disgraceful. I think that he is an American hero for what he did, for the risk that he took in disclosing some of the unconstitutional violations that our government is doing and taking on our behalf. So encouraging whistleblower laws, granting immunity to Edward Snowden, two things that I'd really like to see more of, and two things that RFK has come out in favor of. Piggybacking off of that, the Patriot Act and the NSA Surveillance. Two things that I don't love. I think those are two things that many Americans don't love, but the government should not be able to intrude into your personal life without a warrant or probable cause, as they basically can right now. We have a democracy. There are principles that go behind it. And the unreasonable surveillance of our phones, our phone calls, our call length, and the phone numbers that we dial is unconstitutional, in my opinion. And this overreach by the NSA is, in my opinion, unconstitutional and one of the biggest power grabs that's happened in the last 10 or 20 years. Unfortunately, I don't think that power is coming back into the hands of people. But once that power is in the hands of government, it's not going to go away without a fight. So for RFK to come out and say that he is against the Patriot Act and that he favors restrictions on the NSA means a lot to me, because those are two things that I care about: our privacy rights and also the Constitution. You should not be able to be searched without a warrant or probable cause. I'm going to move on now to some of his foreign policy and defense takes. First up, he is in favor of limited foreign intervention, and he wants to cut military spending. Two things that I agree with. I think we should focus on our domestic problems. I think we can redirect our military and foreign intervention resources to the more pressing domestic issues that we are facing, a la homelessness, national debt, the opioid crisis, etc. And I think our position as Americans, as the global police force, is coming to an end. I'm going to link a really interesting video that has a lot to do with China and Russia and these other countries starting to team up. China has a massive influence in Africa right now. They're starting to control many of Africa's oil fields. The space race is continuing now. So I think we're essentially looking at a new Cold War, if not World War III, with some of the things that are going on in space and the acts that are being taken by the Russians, and also the Chinese in their efforts to control more land, resources, trade routes throughout Africa. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all shapes up. And I think America should take a less interventionist stance, and this would further our relationships with our global partners. Going along with that, we should stop sending our military supplies to Ukraine to fight this proxy war with Russia. There's a lot of conflict and diplomatic tension going on right now between the global superpowers, and these funds that we're sending to Ukraine have been absolutely mismanaged, lost, and wasted. There's a stat out there right now that if we were to cut military spending for just 3 days, we could send every American to college for free. And I realize that that's not entirely feasible because there are tons of people around the world who depend on the military for their salary and for their family's well-being. But you get my point. We should focus our American resources on our own national interests. Moving on to RFK's stance on technology, privacy, and digital rights. He's against the TikTok ban. I'm also against the TikTok ban. I think the efforts to ban TikTok are essentially just a government power grab because the Chinese are kicking our ass in technology and are mining a lot of data, which in today's day and age, 2023, is essentially the currency of our times. And people make a living on TikTok. So I don't think we need to ban it. I think America, if it wants to do something better, should come up with its own technology that rivals TikTok. But as of right now, I'm against the TikTok ban. RFK is as well. And he's also against the new law that has passed about the IRS and PayPal, Venmo. If you make a transaction of over $600 and make more than $600 on those avenues per year, you have to report that to the IRS. So I think there should be a level of financial privacy and digital privacy for us when we use those different avenues of transferring money. Not that you shouldn't have to report your taxes, but I think, again, that's a line that's going to be drawn in the sand, and it's going to keep moving further and further down the line as cryptocurrency emerges, as blockchain technology emerges. And if that line doesn't get drawn in the favor of the public, every single transaction you make is going to be reported to the government, reported to the IRS, and you're going to be crushed for not reporting your $50 on Venmo. So those are two things that I care about. Lastly, the things that I agree with RFK on are his takes on immigration and inclusivity. He has some pretty lax immigration policies and his treatment of undocumented aliens, which, as America, as the wealthiest country on the planet, I think we should treat our aliens with respect. We should treat the homeless with respect, and we should make America a better place for immigrants while also focusing on why places like Mexico are so horrible to live in, why they are being controlled by the drug cartels and corrupt governments, and why people are feeling such a need to flee those countries to come to America. So I think we should relax on our immigration policies and our treatment of undocumented aliens while also trying to make Mexico a better place to live. We just need to be compassionate in the way that we treat our other humans. We need to definitely oppose family separations at the border. That's heinous. No child should be separated from their mother or father at the border for any reason. And I think immigration also brings a lot of economic value to the U.S. and cultural richness as well. I live down here on the Mexico border, so I see it every day. Those are two things that I'm pretty in favor of. And with all that being said, I am not in favor of all of his policies. He has a couple of economic policies that I'm against. Number one, I'm against raising taxes on the rich. I think we should keep taxes stable for everybody. I don't like that there's different brackets for different levels of wealth. If I was the president, I would actually just install a 15-20% tax on everyone to incentivize everybody to play the game and not be penalized for making more money. I think high tax rates definitely cause tax evasion. I think they cause companies and wealthy individuals to pursue avenues of tax evasion or moving their assets abroad, which definitely leads to a decrease in tax revenue for the U.S. And penalizing higher rates of revenue is just counterproductive in our society, in my opinion. Another thing that I disagree with RFK on is he supports the Electoral College. I don't. I think that every individual's vote should count equally. It should carry the same weight regardless of where you live. I think that's what democracy was founded upon. And I think candidates should have to appeal to a wide audience across the nation rather than just focusing on these big swing states that we sometimes see, like Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, California. So the Electoral College was established in a different era. It was a different time. There were different societal structures. And with today's interconnected and mobile society, I think a direct method of electing our leaders through popular vote is the best way to come at it. And RFK also is in favor of raising the estate tax, which is something that I'm not in favor of, because I think lower estate taxes allow people to pass on the fruits of their labors to future generations more easily. I think family-owned businesses should be able to be passed along, and high estate taxes can sometimes force the sale of those assets to cover those tax liabilities. And many other countries around the world have actually gotten rid of the estate tax, but the United States is not one of them. So to remain competitive on the global scale and to avoid capital flight, I think we should either keep tax rates on those type of capital gains the same or lower them.